elected as a member of parliament, an MCA, unless you worship these cult figures, no one is ever going to give you a ticket. But what I'm seeing is a core group of citizens who believe that certain values like integrity matter. So the question then becomes, how do these people get to ensure that individuals who represent their values can occupy the spaces where collective governance occurs, i.e., the state, whether it is the legislature, name it. How do we do it? And it is important moving forward to start thinking about how that will happen. And I can already see how we can be able to do that. And I've been encouraged a lot by what I saw, for example, with Mchanga raising some 30
that you say are not properly structured, and in such a way then they revolve around cult figures. How do we ensure should we scrap the element of funding political parties, and that means get rid of the Political Parties Act 2011?
I think because we have a deficit of values, our priority, from how I see it, is to first deal with this deficit of values. Because again, how accountability works is that if you're talking about ensuring that political parties account for the public funds that they're given, you need people with integrity. You need people with competence. You need for the person that occupies the office of the Auditor General to be competent and have individuals in the legislature. They will ensure that the right people are appointed to these offices.
And this is about the multi-party democracy that we claim to enjoy. I have seen all these formations when they come up, or when they came up, the clamor of all this was to grasp power, if I can use that word. But with that, did it in any way enhance what people will assume to be democracy? You look at the requirements by the Office of the Registrar of Parties when they are asking party members to, or rather, you who is willing to formulate a party, you will go with your list. People are now complaining to have no official minority. And some people are now baptizing themselves the official quote unquote opposition. How do we make sure that this multi-party system actually creates a democracy that does not just support political players to reap the Kenyans, but to enhance what all of us are looking at as better governance?
What I see eventually happening is that there will be different political parties going forward. Yeah? And if you look at the kind of political parties that we have, they're not really political parties that you can really speak of. Like I said, they revolve around cult figures. They are not democratic in themselves. They are not democratical governed, and that then means that the members really do not have any stakes in these parties. They do not really care about what happens in these parties, and that is also why it is then easy for these parties to do whatever it is that they want. When we will have meaningful political parties, as happen in other parts of the world, you will see that there'll be strong internal party democracy. It will be very difficult for the leadership of the political parties to make decisions that ignore the wishes of the political party. So, for example, this ongoing crisis that we have, as the ODM to say about it, when were they consulted? None of that has happened. So again, so for me, moving forward, it is disruptive. Now it means that you might have a situation in which political parties have independent candidates are more in the legislature, for example, the political parties are less. That will then force the political parties, they'll either die, or it will force new parties to emerge that revolve around a democratic ethos. So I see, for me, I see a lot changing by just disrupting the status quo.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. I know you have really been very lenient with your time and made sure that you are able to answer as many questions as possible. But I can tell you all your students are here and their hands are up. Let's hear what they have to say. We start with you, Tom Boyer. Greetings to you. Welcome to the space. Tom Boyer, you have the mic. Kindly proceed. Difficulties. I will welcome Dr.
Then I have some few questions for the legal officer about the democracy in our country. I may wish to ask him about the powers of the General Assembly or the people to amend the Constitution. If you look at that article, they talk of collection of 1 million signatures from registered voters. But the people who have been put constitution. Bill number 2. Because I'm trying to imagine now, go back to the Bill of Rights. It says that every all the people who were arrested during Joe doesn't have any papers. If you look at
Kenya is a little bit off because what you are doing, the young people are supposed to be doing this.
To me, looking back in retrospective was more emotional. And labor, what the hell were they fighting for? Which is actually treated like a privilege that we are granted. Just need to realize that we've smelt in this country in that direction. We have a constitution, and that
like yourself think that
the country. That someone maybe has a high political profile, forms a political party today, and in 1 month talks about how the cost of living is, what is trending in the country, what the other party is talking about. But we don't have that doctrine or that belief or ideology whereby certain citizens align themselves into one direction and the others align themselves into the other, which will make it very hard even to form a coalition after the election, because this party was standing for something and the other one was standing on something. So it will be very hard for these two governments, these two parties to form a coalition. But right now, what we are having is these people have the let's say the Azimio and the Kenya Kwanza were having literally same thing. They were talking about same thing. The price of unga, which will be this one will be 100, this one 120. Yeah, if you listen to them, there was no distinct difference between the two. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Kijana ya Uhuru. We go to
Thanks again, Mizani. And this is just to obviously get back to what Prof was saying. I totally agree when you mentioned about, the lack of values and ethics within our objective. It's not an ideology, because if I fix the price of unga today, does that mean that my problems are gone? So just getting back to multipartism, I would, just as Prof was saying, and conflicts I think we've encountered in the recent past. privilege of having been a voter, outside Kenya, in UK, and in Scotland, for example, in local elections, they allowed 16-year-olds to vote. And 16-year-old doesn't have an ID, but they were allowed. There's a vetting system that they used, whether it was from school, whether it was from their doctors or from their pastors. They were allowed to vote. They were allowed to engage in a political discourse that was charting their local government. Now, if you've perhaps had the opportunity to operate within the UK, for example, their local elections have more weight than even the national elections, because most of the things, the services that from the police, from doctors, from schools, from post offices, these are decided at the council level or the county level. Whether it's 16, whether it's 15, whatever is democratic enough for the nation to accept, we should find a way that we can engage these 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. They don't have to wait for passports or for IDs or for voters card to engage in the political best 20 years. So we should be able to engage them. And this is no disrespect to the elders, that are there leading us. But I think, with the way the world is changing and the speed, we need to engage the youth. We need to engage the Gen Zs. We need to engage, the voters that have been ostracized out of the system. That's what I wanted to share. Thanks, Mizani. Thanks for your.
Thank you very much, David. And I think what you're raising is very paramount for us to see where we want to head as a country, including the issue of the involvement of the population towards the age of 16. You a free pass to make your comments and possibly responses, and then you can also touch something on the issue of multi-party, and if it's something that Kenyans can actually do away with. I know we fought for it in 1992, but is it giving us the fruits? Seeing all the coalitions, governments, and the coalition parties that are being formulated, all in the interest of being part of the eating mechanism. Professor, welcome to the talk.
Thank you very much, Mizani, and all in the space. I think one can't really say that multipartyism should be done away with. The only problem is in our country since 1992. One will realize that actually, strictly speaking, if of political parties, what really makes a political party, you will find that you can't find many. Maybe KANU of Independence was trying to be a political party for a few years before 1969, when they did away with multiparty. 1966, when they did away with multipartyism. Then maybe ODM was also trying to be a political party. One can mention a few which were trying to do so. Why, we don't have of proper political parties can also be traced to the colonial era, because up to 1960, Africans were not allowed to have parties across districts. Most of them were district based and therefore ethnically based. And that is why that particular aspect has never, we have never transcended that, because you'll find that a lot of the parties are still ethnic based. And even if parties have more reach countrywide, but you'll find that is a dominant ethnic group, and it will be said this party belongs to the, so and so forth. So that leaders who came out of Kanu and then began forming political parties in 1991, 1992, they would form parties mostly according to the ethnic groups. And that is why it is really a major problem, because even as people think that they have the right to vote, usually a kingpin tells them how to vote, and all of them vote that way. So that, strictly speaking, they don't have a right to vote, because they vote according to how they've been told by quote a kingpin. But because I did some doctoral work on elections and therefore worked a bit on political parties, when it comes to the coalitions that they make, like if it is Ford, CORD, NASA, Jubilee, Azimio, KKA, those are, strictly speaking, what would be political parties. But people want to hold on to their 90 or so political parties because you use it to negotiate. Had national reach, like you get political parties also, which are there is therefore a major struggle, and I think NCNCC or regional people. Like I can see some things that even are talked. Yes.
You did speak, and just in the same breath that you've spoken. And by so doing, benefit themselves later at the expense of the ordinary folk. How do we ensure that that is done?
I think that can only be done in terms of like the accountability that, for example, this movement is trying to seek from the political class. There are business people who are known to, do tender. They are tenderpreneur fellows. They are not business people who even assist in terms of making the agenda of like what should manufacturing look like. What should the industrial sector as a whole look like? I do concede and I do agree that people who do clean business are very central in the formulation of democratic systems. And therefore, when there are rules about how do you support political systems, because like abroad, there is like a maximum amount of money that any one person can give so that they don't control, a particular system. So that is controlled by the kind of rules, and especially in the campaign financing law, which exists, so that business people, like any other sector, can contribute to policy for good government and all that, but to keep away. Generally, people are known in terms of businesses so that business cannot capture the political people and later a government that comes in.
Thank you. I'd like to hold you there so that I go back to your student. Namzini, I know you're supposed to have spoken. However, allow me to ask Prof to respond to a few questions, Professor Migai. Then I get back to you because I think we have kept you that much. Prof, you've had, we need to have regulations to control whoever determines government in quotes, whether it's the ordinary person or the business people, so that we have a level of control that is for everyone and allows everybody to benefit. How do we do this? Because the Campaign Financing Act, I think it was the politicians actually probably didn't approve it, or there was issues around it. I'd like you to guide us on that. How do we go about that? And how do we actively ensure? Because the problem I also feel is the percentage of the people who, especially the young people who are actively engaging in Nairobi, are made. substantive enough, going by the reaction of
Thank you very much, Mizani. So let's talk about campaign financing, for example. You see, again, you're looking at it, if you're looking at it from the perspective of democracy, the idea is that no one individual should have a bigger or stronger vote than the next individual. So you see, when you allow big business, for example, to fund political parties or to fund candidates for office, whether it is parliament or the presidency, you're giving them stronger votes, you're giving them more votes, so to speak. And when that happens, they distort the democratic process because they'll always carry the day. As the saying goes, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So we want to prevent that. And if you look at the practice of democracy in the US, granted, of course, there's this perception that, or reality in many respects, I love the disruption. Do not want certain things, or that we want how do we occupy those spaces of power so that we are able to advance our agenda? So for me, I would see port of call being if you read your detractors, what they're saying in X, for example, they're saying, but this is just an urban movement. We will be able to kill it using our usual ethnic politics. So how do we overcome that so that it is the movement is stronger at that level? And then look long term. Is it possible to recall members of parliament? Because that way you begin to control the agenda. Democracy also fundamentally is about control of the agenda in the spaces where power is exercised. How do we control the agenda? Ultimately, there has to be a channel for
and then we'll have our closing question.
Thank you so much for the says that this merger between Raila fact that we have, there was a study that was done in 2018, and the findings were that 800 people in Kenya own more wealth than 44 million people combined. That is a huge gap, and there's no way we can have peace in such a situation. This literally even leads towards in houses, behind the four walls, the people who can't get along because either they're not able to support each other in bringing up their families. The other link to this is that I am a feminist, and I believe that there's no way we can have justice if there's no about gender justice. I mean, basically, equity and equality in access to resources and opportunity. are not going to access any, are not benefiting from this, and in that case, there's no gender justice. And moving on to now the bit on democracy, I feel like as a nation, every time we've talked about democracy, it has always been in the context of multipartism. But I believe democracy is beyond political governance. These parties that we're talking about basically propagate personal interests and not the interests of the people. Most of them are founded along tribal lines. They're founded, along the personalities, and not really like most of the speak. And how. Okay. So I'm saying I want to just talk about the public participation process, which is basically one of those processes that gives power to define how resources should be invested. How the information is shared through newspapers. Who reads newspapers at this point in time? How many people have access to these newspapers? The information is shared 2 days before some of these forums take place. How are citizens expected then to participate within such a short notice and prepare to, engage meaningfully within 2 days? Most of these forums are also undertaken at sub-county level. How many people have the resources to travel, from their villages to participate in these forums at the sub-county level? And so you have like a lot of women and youth who don't have resources, who are automatically locked out because they don't have the resources. Even the timings themselves, having these forums at noon, it means women are not able to participate. So how are we claiming to be a democratic nation? Thank you.
Thank you. Critical questions being raised. Hopefully we'll be able to get the answers from our guest speakers. Let's go to you, Anthony. You didn't have an opportunity. You have 3 minutes. Wanjiru, too bad you lost because we were about to come to you. Anthony, please.
Thank you, Mizani. Thank you, Robert. It's always a pleasure to be in these forums where we get to discuss ideas and really learn from each other. When we talk about multi-party and the faculty of democracy, if I put it into the context that Kenya finds itself in today, I would say that this movement, the Gen Z movement, has really shown that a country can be defined in more ways than tribal. In what and how are they showing this? They are showing this by really, really showing us that when we that popular in rural South Africa. don't structure ourselves into an organization that has a stand, and the list goes on. If in performance, because if you look at what this movement is saying, I don't want to use the word Gen Z. The movement is saying is that we really don't matter who was named as the cabinet secretary. All that matters to us is he competent? Is that man or woman competent for that position? Where he comes from was really not an issue for us. I don't know why the president felt that a majority of Kenyans were more interested in regional balance.
We're going to have one government that can't be held accountable. Now, like we saw yesterday when some people were named were nominated to the cabinet. We saw some regions celebrate. Where I come from, precisely celebrated. Sorry about that. Where I come from, precisely celebrated. And one thing I know that we have to do to ensure that what we stand for gets out there is nothing less than civic education, because these people, most people in the villages, especially willing to take part in that. From the people I've talked to,
Yet I'm trying to avoid all the speakers who have already had the
Okay. So one, I truly and that in itself is also breaking people up into
First round is to take all the people in, then look at the second, the two premier, the two big parties which are going to be chosen by the people, and with those, the two of them, they're going to go to the second round, and then the second round they're going to choose. Normally it was Macron who was there, and right now they even had a snap election, which was cheaper. I've never seen a snap election which was done within 2 weekends on a Sunday, because not even during the week. On a Sunday, they wake up, they go, they choose, and the next they wait until the next time. The next Sunday you choose, and that's it. And then all of a sudden you hear, oh, this is the person who was taken in. But the problem in Kenya, where there is a problem, is the treasure, what you call big hole, because the people who are sent in, maybe to go and look for the investors, the Chamber of Commerce.
You are off topic, Anna.
No, I know. I believe you're going to talk about it next time.
Yes,
But
because
the
we are limited with time. We like to. Last 30 seconds presentation.
Times. I think in Kenya, looking at that statement, it's always been the worst of times. We might want to talk about economic democracy, but sadly in this country, economics is actually largely led by politics. Institutions as we have them do not drive the agenda. I mean, we've always asked this question even at Mizani, are we politics led or policy led at the end of the day? We've had Vision 2030, and if we have Vision 2030 and if not institutionalized or applied it in our current state of affairs, then what is the essence of politicians giving us manifestos? I mean, if we really were revolving around some idea, then my argument has always been we should have actually come and implemented Vision 2030 and have political parties serve that document. But again, here is where we are actually, Eli. So this issue of political parties would